Hey, everybody, this is Dr. John Michael Salvato. Welcome to another installment of The Brew, a talk show that's dedicated to the news, the issues, interests, and passions of today's queer pagan. And as we do before we jump on any one of our shows, I really like to point out that guests that appear on our show may or may not be part of the LGBTQI community. There's getting to be too many initials in there. They may not be part of the queer community, but we welcome perspectives which may or may not be shared by the Brew or its hosts or sponsors or viewers. This is all about conversation. So today's guest is somebody I'm extremely happy to have on here. As I've said on some of the other shows, one of the best perks of what I do is getting to be a fanboy with some of my favorite authors and personalities in the LGBTQ community. And our guest today is a published author, a pagan teacher, alternative healer, having studied and worked with the esoteric and healing arts for more than 2 decades. He is currently a minister with the Fellowship of the Phoenix, a practitioner of traditional witchcraft, and is a Native American pipe carrier. And his first 2 books, Underworld and Deeper into the Underworld, were texts that many of you might be familiar with because we've used them in our own masterclass series to dispel the myths and around the underworld as a place of darkness and despair, rather than working with the ancestors and the energetic processes of death and dying and grieving. And his newest book, Upper World, which we're going to talk about today, Shamanism and the Magic of the Celestial Realms, is now available at bookstores and online, and explores the realm of many of the ancient beings in the above worlds, the celestial worlds, that can help us learn about the energies of the universe and transform our lives for healing and power and for spiritual evolution. My guest is Chris Allaun. Chris, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Now, where are you at, Chris?
So I'm in Chicago right now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So you're having, I assume, still having nice weather there as we are today, or?
You know, it's been strange. It's been a very cold spring, early summer. It fluctuates between the 60s and low 70s, and it's raining almost every other day.
Oh, is it?
It's Chicago. It's what it is.
Yeah, the Chicago winters scare me. They just get a little bit too intense. But we're thrilled to have you here today, and I think probably for both for me and for a lot of our viewers, I'd love to hear a little bit about your path and how you identify. Let's start first as how you identify. Did I leave anything out or misrepresent anything in my introduction?
No, the intro was great. You know, I do so many different things. I started out as doing traditional witchcraft, and then I got into ceremonial magic with the OTO. I'm part Cherokee, so I studied Native American spirituality in the Lakota and in the Apache traditions. I do some heathenism, energy work, healing. I'm one of those people who are obsessed with spirituality and energy work. So once I master something, I go on to the next thing. I've been doing that for about 20-something years, 25 years. No, I don't even remember. So it's been a long time.
I can certainly relate to that. That really resonates with me. That I tell people I'm a spiritual junkie.
Yeah.
I identify as a hereditary witch, but spirituality in all of its forms just edifies and deepens our own path, no matter what that path is. So again, it's just really exciting to have you on. What led you? Tell us a little bit about your backstory. What led you to become the person that you are today?
It was interesting because I grew up in the country in Texas, and and we didn't live on a farm per se, but there were farms and horse ranches and cows and everything are around us, and just woods and everything. So I spent a lot of time on the land and things. And my father was very spiritual. I was baptized Catholic, but at some point, my father got tired of Catholicism, so we became Presbyterian, which is the same thing, just without all the cool, like, pretty prayers and statues and things.
And more committees.
And so what we would do is, like, we would go to church every Sunday, and then, we'd get home. And I have 3 brothers, and so my dad would be like, okay, go out in the woods and play and think about God and things. And I was like, okay. So when I found paganism, I was like, wow, the divine is in nature and the earth. This speaks to me. The other thing is, I had a great aunt who, when she would come to visit us, she always told us stories about Ouija boards and like how her house was haunted and things like that, and spirits. And then my mother, she had prophetic dreams all the time, and so she always talked about, for her, the spirits were angels. So it's interesting that you said her hereditary craft, because a lot of times I have found, especially in traditional witchcraft, that a lot of your magical people and witches were actually Christian. And so instead of saying, the faith, they would say it's the angels. So instead of saying the goddess, it's the Virgin Mary. It's interesting because there's this huge debate that says, and I'm a pagan witch / heathen and stuff. I have a Christian background, but that's where my spirit is. But there's this an interesting debate that says, if you're a Christian, it's impossible to be a witch. And I keep explaining to them that's not true, because a very definition, especially in British witchcraft, was you worked with the devil. They weren't so much concerned with the cunning people and the wise people. They were concerned with people who did magic and worked with the devil, who we call the Horned One and so forth. It's just interesting thing. And so, although I have learned as a grown-up, sometimes when those debates happen on Facebook, you take your hands off the keyboard and let people think whatever they want to think, and it's okay.
Yeah, I could have used that reminder earlier today, in fact, when somebody was making that case, and I said, you have to understand, I come from an Italian hereditary line of witches, and that doesn't mean for me that like there's some people out there that we probably both know who say that, well, hereditary witches are somehow more powerful or special, or the goddess's chosen ones. I believe that you're, like Matt Oren and I talked about, you're born a witch. It's all a matter of whether you discover that, but that everybody has that potentiality. And in our tradition, in the Italian tradition, which is different from what Raven Grimassi created as stregaria, but what we would call the path of the strega or stregoneria. The Catholic and pagan came together. And anybody who knows the history of the Catholic Church knows that it's a pagan tradition.
Right.
It's just a pagan tradition that kind of veered off a little bit too much into the authoritarianism and dogmatism. And so I really appreciate that. I appreciate that fact that historically we know the cunning folk, or the old stregas that were called the Benedicaria, nobody had any problems with them. They had problems with the ones who were poisoning people. They had problems with the ones who were doing what they perceived as maleficent magic, and with the ones who were, who were willing to, to call Lucifer by Lucifer's name in my tradition, and the horned god in the British Isles, which just scared people. So I have, along those lines, I have a question for you, and I've got to find my notes on your book. In your book, Underworld, in the first book, in Underworld, you talk about the misconceptions that people have about the underworld, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with this idea, this notion that people have that comes from the Abrahamic traditions. And you write, the underworld is also a place of healing, rejuvenation, and ancient wisdom, adding that in Native American traditions, it's in the underworld that we connect with the spirits who teach us how to cure diseases and rid ourselves of the dark spirits that harm us. Can you talk a little bit to that idea? Because I think so many people, I know that in the classes we teach, in the beginning, there's resistance about the very idea that the underworld could be something other than the place where bad people go.
Right. So I think what happens is you have two sides of that same coin. Is you have people who think, oh, it's all darkness and despair and pain and hellfire and demons and things like that. Then you have the other people, and this comes from core shamanism. And when I say core shamanism, I mean the type of shamanism that isn't taught by indigenous people. It's more of, it's become, and I hate to say it, but it's become more of a new age practice. But what happens in core shamanism is that they believe that the underworld is like a place of forests, and that's where you find your totem, and it's the primal animals and ancient trees, and it can be that, but that's only the surface. I actually enjoy the heathen concept of the three worlds, because in heathenism you have Svartalheim, which is the land of the dark elves and the dwarves, and it's a very rocky type mountainous world. Then you go deeper and you find the realm of hell, and that's in Hel, and that's a place where our beloved dead will go after they pass on, and they are protected and loved and taken care of by the goddess Hela. And then you go even deeper, and it's a world of ice, and that world is called Niflheim, and it actually translates to roughly like the foggy place, or the home of fog, but it's actually a piece of ice. And so through that cosmology, the deeper you go, it changes. And I kind of like that. So in the deeper world, in the underworld, when people are like, oh, I'm in the place of ancient forest, that's great. Keep on going deeper. There's other things. And even the Greeks, and their cosmology, and there was the realm of the ancestors, and there was Tartarus. That was a place where they put the Titans, and that was a little bit more of a scary place and things like that. And then there was the Elysian Fields. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but that was a place of the blessed. So if you were a celebrated teacher or a healer or a warrior, and you did good deeds, then you went to that place. And that's where a lot of modern pagans get their idea of Summerland, that when you die, you go to a place of perpetual summer. But there are places in the underworld that are places of demons. And like in underworld, I talk about the Kelly Pote. And the Kelly Pote, for people who don't know what that is, in Jewish Kabbalistic teachings, you have the 10 fear the tree of life. So during creation, when the tree burst forth, each of those sephiroths kind of burst into being, and the shell became what they call the Kelipot. And so in Jewish mysticism, it doesn't really say how the demons got there, but apparently they crawled from the void and made those old shell, the cast-offs, into their home. Hell, they don't like to admit that the creator, God, goddess, created those demons. You know, they kind of skip over that part. And that's important to know because as we you know, creator has everything for a purpose. I was about to say creator doesn't have accidents, but I think that gods are fallible. And I think once we come to terms with that the universe is not 100% perfect, I think we could reconcile some of the crazy things that happen on a day-to-day basis. But anyway, and so I personally believe, and I work with chthonic spirits. So those of us who work with the Goetia and things like that, we don't consider them demons in the Christian sense, like these evil creatures who come to kill you and cause disease and harm, and they're just gross. They're ancient spirits. You know, some of the ceremonial magicians who I admire, like Aaron Leach, I love him. I joined his page. I love him. I think he's so amazing. But anyway, I agree with him that it's like it's the bastardization of the gods. It's also, I think, the shadow of some of the gods too, because remember, gods are fallible, and so I think that when you call upon ancient powers of like the primal powers, the titans, they do teach us things, and they do have a purpose. But we're calling upon their shadow when we do goetic work, and we don't call them demons per se. We call them chthonic spirits, so the old ancient primal, and what they're for. Because I'm sure some people are aghast, like, why would you do that? So in ceremonial magic, how I was trained is that in your brain, all the angels and the chthonic spirits are superimposed on your mind. And when we control a spirit, it unlocks a part of our psychic potential. Because you know how they say we only use about 10% of our brain, which they say that isn't true. We actually use a lot more than 10. But if you think about it from practical purposes, if you have a vice of, let's say, drinking, and you conjure the chthonic spirit that is in charge of things like that, pleasure, vices, and things, and you learn to control it, what's happening is that you have to extend a part of your energy to connect with those spirits. So, like, if here's your energy, here's a spirit's energy, there's a happy medium in between, and then it affects you, it affects them. So what happens is that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, are the spirits inside your head and it's strictly psychological? Yes. Are the spirits outside of you and are actual spirits? Yes, they're both at the exact same time. And so what happens is by learning to control and to understand the chthonic energies, we learn how to control our energies at the exact same time. And that's the core of why we do it. So if you think about it in those terms, I approach all things like that as in the regard of healing. So everything I do, if it's the underworld, if it's the upper world, or whatever, it's all on the aegis of healing. How can I heal myself? How can I heal the land, the earth? And how can I help kill others.
Absolutely. Last night, and I'm not one. I've seldom done this before, and I've actually, I'll admit that I've scoffed at people who have done so. But last night, we had a friend of ours over, and we were binge watching The Magicians because Sabrina's new season's not on, and so we needed to find something entertaining. And I thought it was going to be we're only on season 1. And I thought it was really going to be one of those things where I got everybody engaged, and then I snuck off to my office like I usually do and played on the computer. But last night's episode, and I have no idea where we are in it, but it's quite a bit into the first season. They actually conjured a demon to bring someone who was dying of cancer back to heal him, to remove the cancer. And when they first started to conjure the demon, I was impressed by a couple of the things that they did that told me something of the writers for the show. And so I was really happy to see some really good, solid, basis for what they were physically doing and what they were saying. And then this demon comes out, and he's a little more effeminate. The joke was that that the demon that they were trying to conjure, his first name begins with an A. He was his brother. His name began with an E. And so he said people make that mistake all the time. But they both did the same thing. And this demon reaches into the hottest guy on the show's stomach and pulls out the tumor, which was a magical tumor that was killing him. And so the rest of the storyline, I won't give spoilers for people who watch that show, but the rest of the storyline went on from there. And I loved the fact that the demon to the sort of the weaker or less initiated did kind of seem a little bit scary. And even watching it in our own home, I could see the folks who were non-pagans, like that was kind of a scary moment. And then there was like the aha moment when they realized, oh, so that's why you do so much work with the darker spirits. That it's not about doing harm, it's about healing, and it's about progress.
I was just gonna say, in shamanism, that sounds like shamanism to me, like how I was trained. Because how I was trained is that you have to be able to navigate in the darkness and the shadow. A, you need to do some shadow work on yourself. But B is because of a situation like that. Like I've been called to houses and to people were possessed, some hauntings, so forth. And I'm very comfortable in the dark. And part of it is I don't see it as harmful. I'm not scared of it. Like I'm aware, for example, if I'm in, a bad part of town in Chicago, I'm not going to just have my headphones on, blare it up and daydreaming. I'm going to be aware of my surroundings. And the same holds true in the underworld or in the upper world. You just have to be aware. And you have to also take some precautions. Like I would never have a student go at it work who didn't know how to do your basic psychic self-defense, your basic exorcisms, your basic banishings, and things like that. It's interesting because a lot of the books, especially in the Solomon's magical books, they assume you've already had the training of the circle and protection and exorcisms and banishings. They assume you already have that training, so it doesn't go over it again. It's interesting because when Underworld first came out, there was a reviewer who said, "Oh, this is such a great book, but if you're a brand new person, don't buy it. But it's great if you know what you're doing." And I just thought that was interesting because I was just like, that's kind of true, but okay, because I do teach in the first Underworld book as well as with Upper World. Um, I teach you how to astral project and journeying, and just so people are aware what's the difference between astral projection and journeying. There's no difference. For a lot of people say, oh, astral projection is where you get out of your body and walk around your house. Oh, that's out of body experience. It's just that thing. But anyway, because I know people ask me that question all the time, what's the difference? There's no difference. It's a terminology. This is what shamans say. This is what ceremonial people say, um, which is in English, we'll call it faring forth, or, things like that. But anyway, I teach how to astral project for beginners, and then deeper into the underworld, I teach some very basic banishing things, but it's towards the end and stuff like that.
It's my favorite part of the book.
And so part of the reason I wrote the books as how I did, and I've gotten interviewers asking me about, like, what's my process? How did I write the books? Like, what happened? I actually, when I was first in paganism, like 25 years ago, or even 10 years ago, it never occurred to me that I was going to be an author. And in fact, I didn't even want to be a reverend. It just kind of happened. I truly believe I was called by the universe to do all these things. But anyway, because I never set out thinking, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a priest, I'm going to do this. It's just sort of happened, But anyway, a long time ago, I attended a workshop with Allaun Milo Duquette, and I'm going to also plug him. If you've never read him, he's awesome because he's funny, and he simplifies a very out there esoteric things, which I try to learn from that as well. But anyway, he said in his workshop, those of you who are teaching a class, a workshop, writing a book, or anything, design something that you wish you had when you were learning. So if you're going to write a book, like whatever subject, if it's magic, crystals, herbs, whatever, write a book that you wish you would have had. And so I took that advice, and how Underworld even happened. But I was teaching a lot of workshops because part of our obligation with the Fellowship of the Phoenix at the time to be a minister was you had to every so often to teach a class. So at the time, there was no underworld classes. You had no ancestor classes. You had no journeying to the underworld. You had nothing. So I wrote some classes about what the Greeks thought and what the heathens thought. And I thought, oh, I'm going to keep on going. And so I researched and I wrote the book and things like that. And I was actually going to stop there. I'm like, okay, I wrote my book and now I'm done. And then all of a sudden, I published through Mandrake of Oxford, and they're a very small independent thing. So unlike the bigger companies that are here in the US, it takes a while to get your book published. So, like, for example, I have some friends who just edit their book, and it'll be out in August. I'm like, well, that's quick, So for me, it was like a year afterwards because there are several authors ahead of me. And so I got bored because I got used to researching and writing so much, and I thought, maybe I write an upper world book. And so I always start with like brainstorming, like, what do I want to talk about? Because for me, I'm an underworld person. That's my go-to. Whatever. Upper world I found for myself when I was learning and my students was the upper world simply by design is a very abstract, and it's energy, it's beauty, it's light, it's all these things. So when you're journeying the first few times, it's kind of hard because you see these energies, you don't know where you're going, and you're not quite sure. Um, so I wanted to write a book. So if you're learning to journey and things like that, here's some traditional places that you can go to. Like for example, Olympus in the Greek pantheon, the Duat in the Egyptian pantheon. I talk about the Babylonian upper worlds. I talk about Asgard and the Hall of Odin in the heathen community. I talk about several other things as well, but just to get people started, because when you're journeying the first few times, you're like, great, I'm here. Where do I go? And I talk about, how to get your totem animal and your upper world guide and things like that, because it very he much helps to have a or several spiritual guides, which leads me, to be honest, to the point of spirit conjuration and things like that. Again, I was always taught that when you work with the spirit, when you conjure a spirit, and this is through my traditional witchcraft teaching, is it's always better to journey to the spirit first, and that does a few things. You get to have conversations with them. You get to feel their energies. So when you're conjuring, when you're in your temple space and you have your circle and your black mirror or crystal ball, whatever you want to use, you're not just blindly calling to say the angel Azazel. You're not just saying, Azazel, come here, and then nothing happens. What happens is that if you have already had a conversation, hey Azazel, so I want to work with you. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, great. So what kind of sigil, what kind of symbol do you want me to use to conjure with? Oh, here's something, and it shows you a picture, and you wake up from your journey and you draw it or write it down or whatever. Which I'm already hearing people say, oh, but the grimoires already have sigils. That's a great starting point. It's a great starting point. But those sigils are 500-600 years old. And so perhaps, and again, if you're doing traditional Solomon magic, then do that. If you're doing it through the aspect of witchcraft or shamanism, then always ask the spirit what kind of sigil, or maybe it isn't a sigil, maybe it's a chant or a prayer that they want you to call them by. And so when you do that, and you're in your temple space, it's an easy to just bring to your mind, to your heart. How did it feel when you were having a conversation with say Azazel? How did that feel? So bring that feeling into your temple space again. And so so I've never actually seen that in any other book. So when I wrote Upper World, I said, okay, I found this to be very effective and easy, so I want to write about that. So that's where the premise of an upper world got.
Yeah, I think. Tell me if you think that this is kind of a good analogy for that. In our everyday lives, we meet people, and there may be somebody that tells us, "Oh, you should talk to my friend Chris. He's a writer, and here's his number in Chicago," and they give me a phone number. That phone number they may have had in their Rolodex or their cell phone. I just made myself sound really old, in their iPhone for 5 years, but your number might have changed, and so I may go to a conference and meet you in person, and we have an engaging conversation. And in that conversation, you give me the number to reach you by. And when I go home, my personal way of connecting with people that I meet at conferences is always to send them a handwritten note and let them know what I appreciated about that encounter, so that there's a connection there. So now I have the way to reach you. I have expressed my gratitude, and I've gotten a sense of that mutuality of what you may want from me. So the gods or the spirits, are in relationship to us. It's not. I try to tell people it's not about worshiping them. It's about being in relationship with them. It's devotion, not worship. And when you're devoted, you're connected to someone. You truly appreciate what they are and who they are and what they bring to your life. Then it's natural to want to give something back. So we give that service, we give that offering, we leave the bag of canned goods or whatever at a food bank as our offering to the Mother Hecate or whomever it might be. We're not doing that because she demands it like the Abrahamic traditions, God's demiurge does. We're doing it because that's our way of saying, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing for me and want to do everything I can for you in return. Would you say that's the idea that you sort of explore and unwrap in explore, because I think a lot of people think the upper worlds, they think, oh, that's just where we say a prayer and Odin gives us what we want, or Shiva bestows on us what the boon, and there's no relationship there.
So you brought up some really great points, a few points. So the first point what you talked about is about the brand new phone number. Like I said, is when you're a very, very beginner and your teacher says, if we're going to take the Key of Solomon, we're going to flip through those pages and we're going to use those sigils to call whichever angel or spirit or whatever, do that. However, if you're doing it from a traditional witchcraft point of view or a shamanistic point of view or a general pagan point of view, that's just a starting place, and go further. It's almost like, for example, using your own analogy, I may text you with the phone number I got from a friend, but then I may say, how would you prefer for me to contact you? Would you like a text, a phone call, or an email, or on Facebook Instant Messenger? And by the way, I almost always tell people Facebook Instant Messenger. The reason is my email doesn't send alerts. I guess I could change them, but I don't want to. But my Facebook, it sends me alerts every time someone messages me, and so I always see it. But anyway, so it's the same thing. I know a few magicians who are like hardcore into the Solomonic magical system, and that's great if that's what you enjoy. And I belong to a few online classes with that. And it's fun to hear people talk and share their experiences and things. And they say all the time, if you enjoy this, then by all means do it. However, if you're your angel, your spirit, your ancestor says, use this sigil instead, then do that. Because I have found that if they show you a symbol or sigil or drawing or whatever, then that's a personal thing for you. It's like a personal phone line. It's like the bat signal. You pick it up and it goes directly to them. You know, what was the second part of your question?
Well, I was just saying that, you know, that's the difference that from what I take your book, which for those that are watching, we should say in Upper World, oh, I've lost the title. Here we go. Upper World, Upper World Shamanism and Magic in the Celestial Realm. The difference, what you're bringing to them, is the difference between just, you know, saying a prayer and expecting
Right.
boon, and actually cultivating relationships and exploring the
Right.
magic, the healing, and the sort of the wonder that waits for us in those celestial realms.
That's exactly what I do. One of the most powerful spiritual things that I do weekly is I do a energetic for devotion to the gods. So in the book, on the chapter on the gods, I talk about how to find your gods. You know, I know some people have the great goddess and the great god, and I think that's okay. Um, for other people, they want to have relationships with Hecate and Diana and Thor and Isis and whoever. And I teach how to find that, how to do research, how to meditate, how to journey and speak with the deities. And then I teach you how to set up a god and goddess altar. And by doing that, I teach how to have a very direct, energetic experience, like you're sharing your energies, and they give you energy, and it's cool because it's a very true energy exchange. It isn't me saying, "Oh, please do this." I mean, and don't get me wrong, prayers are great, and in Lakota we and Apache as well, we pray every day, and you know, but we don't think of it as fold your hands and wish for something. We're having a conversation with the divine. And to be honest, one of those things that I don't see a lot, that I was the very first thing I was taught in my Native American training is you have to have gratitude. So you always start all prayers with thank you for A, B, C, and D. You know, the Lakota say every step on the earth should be a prayer. And so what that means is everything you do is sacred. Every breath you take is sacred. Every time you eat, every time you go to the bathroom, every time you shower, every time you go to work, and everything is a part of the divine in the universe. So anyway, getting back to the relationship and the energy with the gods, I talk about how to, by sharing your energies, it makes you understand the gods more, and it makes them understand you more. And I also, when it comes to offerings, I always look at it like this. I can afford my own flowers. I don't need someone to buy me flowers. But if, say, a friend who I helped out or whatever just came up and say, here's some flowers, that means something. That's like, wow, that was so amazing, and thank you so much for thinking about me. And I didn't need the flowers. I mean, if they didn't buy me flowers, that's okay too. But because they showed me appreciation, it deepens our energetic exchange. Same thing if like a parent. If you're a parent and your child goes and picks up some weeds that may or may not have a flower on it, looking all crazy and wilted, how amazing that that 4-year-old or 5-year-old or 6-year-old thought loves you and gave you that gift. It's the same thing with the gods. Well, they don't need our offerings, but it deepens and strengthens our bond. And I can't stress that enough. You know, and the gods don't ask for things so much. Sometimes the spirits will ask, especially if you have like a contract when we get them, and it sounds so diabolical with a contract with the spirit. So, for example, if I say, "Hey," I'm just going to say Azazel again. Azazel, help me find a job. And he goes, "Okay, what are you going to do for me? What do you want?" I would like an offering of a bushel of apples. Great, done, easy enough. I will say, and most angelic spirits and like the upper world spirits, they rarely ask for strange things like, "I want a severed head of a cow." Okay, that's not going to happen. Sometimes the demons may ask for that. If that happens, you say, "No, but I can get you a nice steak. I can do that." For all you people out there who haven't had this experience with the spirits, only agree to do an offering if it's a sensible thing that you're able to do. For example, I live in Chicago. I don't have access to a goat. So if a spirit said to me, "I would like goat meat," I don't have access to that. And so I may say, "Oh, how about a chicken or a fish or whatever else?" And it sounds like bartering, and it kind of is, but it's more of here's what I'm able to do, because don't agree to do something to then you don't do it, and that's just bad vibes. And also the spirits, like, well, I mean, think about it. If a friend says to you, "Hey, if you help me paint my house, I'll buy dinner," and then they don't, it's like, we're still friends, but it's kind of a bummer. It's kind of weird. And so the next time they say, "Hey, help me paint my house and I'll buy you dinner," and you're thinking, "No, you won't." You're not going to. But anyway, and so it's just, for the whole book, to be honest, is about strengthening your bonds with the spirits, the divine, the angels, things like that.
Thank you so much. And I hate to say that we're out of time. I appreciate you going a little long with us because I looked at that clock at 30 minutes and I thought, well, you look as comfortable as I am about talking about this. Let's just keep going. The book, ladies and gentlemen, is called Upper World Shamanism and Magic of the Celestial Realms. The author is Chris Allaun. Chris, thank you so much for being here. We'll look forward to hearing from you maybe again once we've got some readers with the books out. Maybe you'll jump on one of our group discussions and answer some questions. We'd love that. And ladies and gentlemen watching, we thank you. And as we say at the end of every one of our broadcasts, I encourage you to stay in the moment, because that's where the power is. To be grateful for everything you've got, because without that gratitude, if you can't be grateful for what you've got right now, I promise you, you are not going to be any happier with more. And always remember, the best is yet to come. We'll talk to you soon.